Right. This has been a very good initiative. We'll come back to that shortly. It's part of my agenda where we'll have time to talk about TACs. But before Japan comes on floor, we want the Secretary to clarify the guidelines and the timelines for submission of FAT-set information. So Secretariat can come in now. Then after Japan comes, and then we'll continue. But rest assured that we'll get to the TACs, and then we'll allow everybody to speak his mind, so that at the end of the day, we'll be able to say, we've done something before we go home.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the specifications of paragraph 31, in order to define the information that is required in terms of historical FAT-set data, the catch-and effort, which has already a form and the format and the specific structure, it's already it's self-explanatory. It's already it's a format that has been and is revised by the scientific committee every year, and it's a standard provision that is linked to the Article 9 of the ICAT Convention. So basically, specifying that we have the structure and we have the format of the information required. What we need here basically is to specify the number of years we require. Backwards in time, I think it's a good proposal. It can be 10 years or between 2010 and 2022 or something on that line. Thank you.
Now, Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually raising my hand to discuss our proposal, but I think I'd like to respond to the explanation made by the Secretariat. So I think if my understanding is correct, the format is very clear, and every CPC must use that format. But regarding the how many years going back, I think we really need to hear from the SERS if 5 years would be enough or 10 years would be enough. Then once we decide that, for example, 5 years would be enough, I think every concerned CPC shall submit the data for 5 years using the specified format. So, and after finishing this topic, I'd like to go back to our proposal. Thank you.
Dr. Melvin will try and answer that question.
Thank you, Japan. Actually, the further back we can go, the better, because it will provide us with more information. 5 years would probably be adequate because it would cover both the period of pre and post-COVID to give us some indication what transpired during that time frame, and so we don't bias the information based on that. But in reality, it would be nice to see 10 years. So 5 years would be adequate, 10 years would be preferred, and even further back, if at all possible, would be appreciated. So they're basically those three categories, but at a minimum, I would suggest 5 years. Thank you.
I believe, Japan, you are satisfied with that explanation.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Melvin. So I think we should clearly record that at least 5 years, preferably 10 years or longer. So I think everybody must be very clear about the requirements on paragraph 31. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. Now we go to another level. Last time we met, right, we started talking about some allocation keys. We talked about the EU proposal, And in the agenda, we have other CPCs who have proposals. South Africa had a proposal on small harvesters, PA1507. They didn't have the opportunity to tell us something. And then also, just this morning, Japan also had on the link 511. So we left off there. So since we are opening keys to a Pandora's box, we want to hear from South Africa if they are prepared to share their key with us. Then after Japan, if Japan is also prepared to share their special key with us to open that box, then we can then have some time to talk about keys, which we know are going to be difficult because we have several keys. We want one best fit key, which will open the way forward. Well said by Honduras, very good initiative. And if time will permit, right, he said if time will permit, then we are reaching our objective. We need to have enough time to distribute all opportunities and to see that we have a way forward at this meeting. So South Africa, if you are prepared to table your draft allocation and management of small harvester, PA 507 2022, you have the floor to open the key for us, and maybe your key will be the best.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to introduce, our brief proposal. I'd like to clarify that this is not an allocation key, and it's certainly not intended to be a comprehensive allocation mechanism. It is just one, it really just addresses one part of the allocation picture, and that is an area that we raised some comments about in the intersessional meetings in particular, and that is the small harvesting CPCs. So, and I think that this is a concern related to the need for greater flexibility in the application of catch limits to the small harvesting countries, and this was shared and recognised by some other CPCs in these previous discussions. Chair, South Africa provided a first draft of a proposal on small harvesters to the second intersessional meeting of Panel 1. However, reflecting on some of the discussions, including the difficulty of negotiating complicated allocation mechanisms in this kind of forum, and the differential development rights of CPCs within this group and all groups, but in particular small harvesting group, we submitted a revised and somewhat simplified proposal for the consideration of CPCs at our meeting today. This revised proposal, as you said, is provided in PA 1507. As we've said before, this group of harvesters takes only around 5% of the Big I catch, and this level of collective harvest has been relatively stable over time. These CPCs are small players in terms of the overall impact on the Big I stock. Nonetheless, many of these CPCs have legitimate rights and aspirations to develop their fisheries, and should not be prevented from doing so by those countries that had the fortune to develop their fleets first. Flexibility for these countries is entirely reasonable and does not present a risk to the stock. Nonetheless, we understand that some checks and balances are warranted. Our proposal is that these small harvesting CPCs do not have binding catch limits based on historical catches placed upon them, consistent with previous iterations of the tropical tuna measure. However, noting CPC's concerns about accounting for these CPCs, these small harvesters in the TAC, and the need to have some checks in place, we propose that these CPCs have a trigger limit of 1,000 tonnes per CPC